don't think it's possible at all that maybe they looked at the game between Michigan and Michigan State and saw some of those. I mean, a bundle of those bad calls, and that may have impacted some of that because, you know, the last thing the last thing that I enjoy doing is blaming the refs for anything. I'm one of those. I believe you ought to beat the team. Don't blame the refs because every single game there's going to be at least one or two bad calls. You know, every game. It's just you've got to just prepare for it. And especially in the Jim Harbaugh era, we flop these big games anyway. So the last thing I want to do is blame the ref. But, dude, that game was, I mean, it was bizarrely crazy. I mean, I don't think I watched it so closely. Every time any kind of play was in question, it always went to Michigan State. I don't know if you noticed, but when Kenneth Walker ran one of those touchdowns in, he dropped the ball before he went in the end zone. It was a touchback. You could see it when they reviewed it. His hand was loose. He didn't have possession of the ball. And if the ball went in the end zone, that should have been a touchback. They ruled it a touchdown. And then obviously the Aiden Hutchinson, that was clearly a fumble. And Aiden Hutchinson picked it up and put it in the end zone. That was a touchdown for us. So they gave Michigan State a touchdown when they shouldn't have. And then they took one from us. And not just that, but I mean, I couldn't even count all the pass interference that was going on with Michigan State secondary. I mean, it was even the last play. I mean, and I'm not griping or complaining about it. It's done now, but that game was just crazy, the bad calls. I mean, it was beyond a lot of games that I've seen. Like, it was way beyond. And I'm subjective because I even said that during the Nebraska-Michigan game that it was a little bit crazy towards Michigan. That last drive when they stripped the ball from Adrian Martinez, I thought that his forward progress had stopped and they should have blew it dead then. That would have caused Nebraska to win the game because all they had to do was score kick the 3-pointer. So I'm trying to come at it from a non-bias, but basically, do you think that might have something to do with it? Because I mean, it was a totally different level of crazy, the play calling.
So yes, I do believe that has something to do with it. So the rankings are made based on wins and losses first and foremost, or they should be. But of course, you know, we're just not going with standings. It's not the NFL. There has to be an evaluation on the games. And so if Michigan State would have won that game 42-0 versus what happened, that game would be completely evaluated differently than what it is now. To your point, the Big Ten office has admitted that there were wrong calls in that game. So sure, the committee looks at that and says, we're just trying to evaluate the teams and select the best team. Here we have a game where one team won the game, but they benefited from a number of either bad calls or questionable calls. Therefore, we're kind of setting that aside as to what the result of the game was and just looking at the two teams and who's the better team. Well, Michigan had a 2-touchdown lead. They blew it, but there were a number of, again, questionable calls, bad calls. They were also playing on the road. It was a razor close game, even with the bad calls. Now, the two calls that you bring up, the call with Kenneth Walker dropping the ball at the goal line, you know, I haven't seen these plays in 2 weeks. It's been 2 weeks, so I'm going off memory of watching, 100 hours of football since then. But I thought that was inconclusive. And if anything, I thought it showed that he had the ball in his hand when he crossed the goal line. That said, even if he didn't, let's say he dropped the ball a split second before he hit the goal line. Let's say he dropped the ball at the 1-yard line. Now, the officials have to call the game the way it's played. And if somebody's enough of a knucklehead to drop the ball at the 1-yard line, then, hey, you didn't score a touchdown. You got to carry the ball into the end zone. True. But in terms of evaluating football play, that doesn't make Michigan a better defense because Kenneth Walker dropped the ball at the half-yard line. Like, that's
sure.
You don't want to win or lose a game based on a player dropping the ball just inadvertently at the 1-yard line because Michigan's defense didn't prevent a touchdown. They did not play well on that play. Kenneth Walker scored a touchdown. So I see that as inconclusive and not really a factor. The fumble play, my thought was, I saw the replay 28 times like everybody else watching the game, and I couldn't really tell whether, and again, I haven't seen the play now for 2 weeks, so it's fuzzy in my head, but I know at the time that I couldn't make a determination on whether he fumbled or not. But the officials on the field called it a fumble. There was not nearly enough evidence for the replay booth to overturn that call. So they should have kept the call on the field of a fumble for a touchdown.
That was what was so astonishing to me, is they were so conservative when it had something to do with Michigan. But with Michigan State, I mean, throughout the game, I mean, they were now on our end, they were calling Michigan for anything and everything. I mean, they were so on top of it. I mean, I can't tell me. And it was our fault. And now I'm not blaming the refs, because I really believe Jim Harbaugh lost us that game. Now, obviously, we have a lot of problems in the red zone, and that's true, but he played way too conservative. You're not going to win these big games kicking 3-pointers in the red zone. You're just not. And he's a bad habit of doing that. He's still got an NFL mindset. And I think that hurts us. And I think that one reason that Purdue beat Michigan State was because they were ready for Kenneth Walker. They studied Michigan State. And that's a problem that I have with Jim Harbaugh. It just seems like we go out there just to play a normal Saturday game of football. Here we go again. Let's just do the best we can do. And it just didn't seem like they were ready for Michigan State's tactics. Purdue clearly was, and they were ready for the throwing game. And one thing that whoever the guy was that was talking about the Michigan State, the BCS guy, he said that Michigan State looks like a more complete team. What I personally got from that was, he said that Michigan looks like more of a complete team. Michigan State is pretty much Kenneth Walker. It's not that Michigan State looks fantastic. It's that Kenneth Walker looks fantastic, and he happens to be wearing a green jersey. And I'm not saying anything, because Michigan State does have they have some good defensive players. They're a good team, but he literally scored every point during the game with Michigan. If Kenneth Walker would, and God forbid, because I don't care how much of a rivalry. I hate seeing anybody get hurt. These are just young kids. You know, I hate it when people cheer when the opposite player from the opposite team gets hurt. But just say something happened to him and he was out, it would be just like Minnesota with Ibrahim. I mean, they would have nothing. He's their one and only. I mean, you've seen Friday Night Lights with Boobie Miles. Kenneth Walker is Boobie Miles. He's their one and only.
Well, sir, you do realize that Mo Ibrahim did get hurt in week 1 against Ohio State, and that's not hurt. In all due respect to his ability and talent, which is exceptional. He's one of the best backs in the nation. That Minnesota's rushing game has really not suffered much. They even had their number 2 and 3 running backs leave. So they've been able to run the ball for well over 300 yards several games since then without Mo Ibrahim.
Sure.
And the one thing I will say about Kenneth Walker, yes, he's great. He's exceptional. I would give him the Heisman Trophy today if the vote came out and I had a vote. But at the same time, Michigan State's passing attack has been arguably better than Michigan's. So it's not all him.
Agreed. Well, in Michigan, our passing is just such an incredibly low bar because we can't do anything. I think when they throw the ball and one of our receivers catches it and they go out of bounds in the 10-yard line in the red zone and they don't run it for the touchdown, I'm one of the only ones not cheering because I already know we just lost 7 points because we're going to end up kicking three-pointer. We have so many problems in the red zone, and I don't know how much of that is talent and how much of it is play calling, but clearly we've got some problems with our talent. I'm going to be at the Penn State game, so I'm hoping that I think it's a winnable game for us. And like I said, I watched the Steve Dace. Look, we got to say a prayer for Steve Dace because he's been through a lot as a Michigan fan, and he's got the worst of both. Because here's what it is: he's seen so much Michigan football, it's hurt him just like it's hurt me. If we play Ohio State and Ohio State smashes us, I mean, it's just going to continue on with the depression. And then if we manage to beat Ohio State, Steve Dace may have a heart attack. So we got to say a prayer for Steve Dace because he's just like me. I'm in the same boat, man. Us Michigan fans have been through a lot. I want to say one more thing. The guy was talking about USC and their coaching search. Correct me if I'm wrong, but my personal belief is if Florida gets rid of Dan Mullen, I really believe Dan Mullen could be a very viable candidate to go to USC. I think USC is looking for something fresh, And especially somebody that's familiar with the SEC. I know a lot of people are saying, no, he's an SEC coach. Dan Mullen's like from Delaware.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't care about being in the Southeast.
Yeah.
I really believe he could be a very good prospect. I believe USC would pick him up in a heartbeat. Yeah. I really thought they were going to go for James Franklin, but James Franklin's kind of a lame duck at this point. But I won't take it. I know you got a bunch more calls, man. I just wanted to holler at you and give you my point on that. I know I'm motor mouthing a little bit, so I apologize. And I just appreciate you taking my call.
Well, I appreciate you calling. Enjoy the game this weekend. Yeah, you're going to be right there in Happy Valley. So, yeah, enjoy the game.